Disclaimer. The following content is entirely fictional and does not represent real events or people. This material has been edited and adapted from the channel Romance Reverie. The gentle wind assisted me in my movements, as I went to strike the male figure with all of my energy that was now left in my body. The male raised his left hand to the right as I repeated my move once more, moving forwards whilst the figure moved back. The alpha speed was building up within me as I used every ounce of strength I had left as I repeated my moves again. Left. Right. Going as fast as I could. Once the figure in front of me began to slow down, I managed to strike the side of his head. Not too soft, but not too hard. I watched the male figure fall backwards onto the grass and shook his head with a proud smile. Your daughter is getting stronger by the day. Alpha Nick. The beta. Gordon said, between breaths, as I laughed and stretched out my arm to help him up. Of course. My father replied with a wink. She has the alpha blood running in her veins, and to top it all off, she has been training since she was just a pup. My father had been watching me train with the beta for 30 minutes straight, keeping an eye out on my techniques and my movements to see if I was improving. I'll see you in a bit, Gordon. The beta nodded and gave me a proud smile before heading towards the pack house where the rest of the pack members were staying in, including my family. Once Gordon was out of sight, I squealed like a teenage girl, leaving my father to chuckle. Am I really improving? Davina. You might as well be faster than me, he answered with a wink, leading me towards the massive pack house where I could already smell dinner. Once my feet stepped into the content atmosphere, I relaxed as I saw children, teenagers and adults happily chatting in the pack's living room, as if they had no worries in the world. I spotted my mother in the large kitchen, chatting with others her own age. I watched my father quickly walk towards her and as if in a hurry, he gave her a peck on the cheeks whilst the adults around him bowed in submission of their alpha before retreating back to his office. Tilting my head, I shrugged before sauntering towards my mother whom had been blushing madly and gave her a kiss on the cheek as well. Hi Luna, I said with a smile, giving her one of my warmest hugs as she smiled softly before wrapping her arms around my small waist. Davina. The adults that surrounded us gave a small nod in my direction before leaving me alone with my mother. How was your training? My mom asked, looking worried as her blue eyes scanned every aspect of my face. Since I was wearing a pink sports bra, she had noticed the cut on my right exposed shoulder. It's slowly healing. Don't worry, I answered, giving her a see you later kiss on the cheek again before heading towards my father's office, wanting to check on him. Once I opened the wooden door that led to his small office, he quickly tensed up at my entrance and placed down his phone before writing something down on a notepad, then tucked it away under his table. I arched my eyebrow, bemused at his actions as I suddenly became cautious. What's wrong, Dad? My father suddenly looked up and relaxed at the sight of me before he plastered on a fake smile, gesturing for me to come forward and sit on one of the brown leather armchairs that were positioned in front of his desk. Nothing, Davina. I need to talk to you. I nodded as I took a seat and tried to make myself as comfortable as I could, knowing that something was bothering my father. Davina. You're turning 21 this year and you still haven't found your mate yet. I blinked, looking at him as if he was insane, then laughed. Dad, remember how I would always ask you that if I ever find my mate, What would you do? I mentioned at the fond memory. My father's face softened at the memory himself and chuckled. Yes. And my answer would always be that I would rip off his head in just a millisecond. I nodded. Maybe that's why I haven't found my mate yet. He scoffed. Anyway. Now that you're older, you are ready to take the alpha position. And when will you be stepping down? I asked. Sadness engulfing me, knowing that I would be the next she-alpha, and that would also mean that I wouldn't have any time for my parents anymore. In 2 weeks. Hopefully. He answered. A little distracted. Get change and we'll see you at dinner. I nodded in response. Rising from chair before leaving as I headed upstairs towards my room where the unmated females would stay. The pack house is divided into 4 floors. The first floor being my father's office. The pack's living room and kitchen. The second floor being where the mated wolves would stay, and the third floor being where the unmated females would stay, and the fourth and lucky last would be where the unmated males would stay. It wasn't such a big problem since we only had around 100 or 2 wolves in our pack. Once I reached the 3rd floor, a trio was huddled together in the hallway. Giggling, but at the sound of my entrance. Their heads instantly snapped towards me before giggling uncontrollably again. Rolling my eyes, I strolled right past them to only hear one of them say, "We don't want a she-alpha ruling this pack because it would be like a death wish. We need a man." I turned around. Narrowing my eyes, one of the 3, who had said such a horrible thing, as my eyes finally landed on the girl with dark red hair and hazel green eyes. The other 2 black-haired girls laughed again as if someone was tickling them. "What did you say?" "You heard me, Davina." The red-haired girl answered with a smirk. "You know what I'm capable of," I declared. Clenching my fists, then growled at them as they suddenly widened their eyes before running down the hallway in just a heartbeat. I sighed heavily, shaking my head before entering the large room that smelt of roses. My scent. I didn't have much friends, nor would I want any. I mean, I know I was the alpha's daughter, and stereotypically, I should have been popular like all the other alpha daughters, but my pack recognized me as a badass and a sassy bitch since I was 12. Who could blame them though? My father has always told me that, to be a strong leader, people should fear you. I hopped into the small shower, as the cold water suddenly splashed onto my flesh, making me shiver as I forced myself to massage my scalp thoroughly. Half an hour later. Yes, it takes me that long to take a shower. I stepped out and plaited my wet brunette hair into a side braid. Dressed into gray sweats and a white singlet before exiting my room, I began to head downstairs to dinner. My mother looked at me from afar, and when she suddenly saw what I was wearing, she dropped everything on the dinner table before marching her way towards me, frowning. "You should dress appropriately for dinner, Davina. It's just dinner, not a gathering," I whispered in response with a smile on my face as she shook her head in amusement before making our way towards the long glass dinner table and then taking a seat. My father was to be seated at the head of the table, where my mother would sit on his right and it would be on the left. Next would be the beta, his mate and their pups. Then after would be the 3rd in command, and his family along with other high-ranked wolves, whilst the other pack members were to eat outside as if they were having a picnic. My father gave me a wicked smile before standing up, raising his glass as he tapped softly on it with a spoon. I was expecting some small sound, but instead, the sound had echoed throughout the enormous room. making others who were passing by to halt in their tracks and turn their attention towards their alpha. Tomorrow evening, there is to be a barbecue to celebrate Luna Shea and his 25th anniversary. He announced loudly as my mother stood up by his side and placed a soft kiss on his cheek. The people who had heard the announcement suddenly cheered and clapped, whereas I smiled proudly at the sight of both of my parents. But the way my father was discomforted earlier still bothered me. Looks like I was going to find out for myself. "Thank you so much," I said to an old lady who stood behind the cash register with a wide, fake smile plastered on her pale face, as I grabbed the brown grocery bag from the counter and turned around. Register ladies don't actually smile for real unless they are devoted to their job, but I'm certain that this lady doesn't. As I walked away, my wolf enhanced my hearings, as I heard her sigh heavily, and cursed under her breath, for how hopeless her fake smile was and that she needed to improve on it. I chuckled under my breath, shaking my head whilst bumping into a hard wall. I looked up to find myself not facing a wall but a man. My bad. It was a person. Sorry, I muttered with an apologetic smile before heading off. Just as I was about to cross the hectic road, a strong, large hand seized my forearm and pulled me back, catching me by surprise. "I don't accept your apology," a deep, masculine voice said as I looked up to see a man with a stoned face, not bothering to assess his appearance. I scoffed. "What are you going to do about it?" I arched my eyebrow, setting down the bag of groceries right beside me. "Wow. I was expecting you to scream or cry like most girls," he answered before arching an eyebrow whilst putting his hands on his hips as another man approached and stood right next to him with a devilish smirk. It wasn't even attractive. I rolled my eyes, annoyed at how rude humans can be. I picked up the grocery bags before heading towards the other direction, knowing that I could just run into the forest since I was familiar with it. I glanced at my watch, knowing that I was already late for my parents' anniversary since it had already begun half an hour ago. Just before I could even take 5 steps, I was stopped again by the same hand. My wolf was immediately on high alert as I looked up at the afternoon, pinkish and orangish sky. Sighing, I turned around and frowned at the two men who was now both smirking as I placed down my grocery bags once again before rolling up my imaginary sleeves. I decided that I needed to kick some balls. And so that's what I did. I managed to boot the man who had grabbed my arm earlier where it would hurt most. His crotch. I watched in satisfaction as the man let out a cry in pain and grabbed his crotch as I snickered at the sight before his friend grabbed my brunette hair and threw me across the floor with all of his strength whilst people was already huddling, forming a crowd. I bit my lip from growling, since it would cause suspicions, as I ran towards the man who had grabbed my hair and tackled him down onto the ground easily, before punching his jaw repeatedly until my knuckles began to hurt. Not long after, another pair of strong hands grabbed my white shirt, lifting me up with ease as he threw me towards the crowd, making them all step back as if I was some sort of disease. "You messed with the wrong girl," I declared out loud, ignoring the stinging pain that engulfed my body as my wolf's strength had taken over before I ran towards the nearby fountain and jumped onto the edge, kicking the man's face with my shoes. The man fell to the floor, slamming his head against the concrete as I cracked my knuckles. In the corner of my eye, I saw the man who now had a crooked-looking jaw as I pivoted around and dodged his arm that was going to put me into a headlock and grabbed his left arm, twisting it backwards before kneeing him hard in the stomach as I heard him screech, I released his arm and kicked his back to the ground, letting him collapse onto his knees with a groan. I watched both of the men crouched on the ground, giving me a deadly glare as I placed my hands on my hips in triumph whilst the crowd cheered and applauded. I curtsied at every single angle before wiping the blood that was trickling down my lips. I grabbed the grocery bags before checking the time on my wrist once again. 7 p.m. Shit. I flew the cheering crowd into the direction of the dark and lonely woods, running as fast as I could towards my territory as I could detect the ache in my feet. I clenched my jaw at the pain whilst pushing myself harder, the wind blowing against me. A new scent collided with my nose when I reached the pack grounds as I cautiously sniffed out the foreign scent. There were multiple scents here. I was sure of that. As I slowed down my pace and set the grocery bags behind a nearby tree before observing the area around me, thanking the moon goddess that I was a wolf since the eyesight was significantly useful. I stepped into the clearing. Limp bodies collapsed onto the grass, reared myself back into the trees as both of my hands suddenly clasped over my mouth. I stood there for moon goddess knows how long, thoughts running wildly in my head as the hurt and anger coursed through my entire body, as if on their own accord. My legs ran towards the lifeless bodies that laid peacefully on the swaying grass in their beautiful attires, noticing some elders' and adults' necks that had been split open by wolf claws. I fought the urge to cry. One of the bodies had caught my eyes as I suddenly ran over to it and crouched down, my eyes assessing every pale feature before realizing it was the beta. I cringed at the sight of his face as half of it was clawed off. I swallowed the lump that was rising in my throat. I kissed two of my fingers before placing it onto his other half of his forehead before getting up and was already heading towards the pack house. Bodies of dead children laid lifelessly on the floor whilst I noticed some young adults and teenagers scattered across the kitchen countertops, some with their heads detached from their necks and some with missing body pieces. I clenched my fists at the horrifying scene before me as I slowly and cautiously walked into my father's office, afraid of what I might see next. My hands grabbed the door handle as my heartbeat began to increase, whilst I opened the door slowly, only to smell a familiar scent. Blood. Sweat trickled down my forehead as my blue eyes caught sight of two dead but familiar bodies. My eyes welled with tears as they caught sight of my pale and lifeless mother, laying on one side of the floor with her head detached from her body whilst my lifeless father. A knife struck through his chest where his heart would be beating. I gagged at the sight. The lump in my throat was too big to swallow, so I let my tears run freely down my cheeks. I screamed, cried and begged for my parents to come back to me as the hurt and anger surfaced, making my inner wolf rise, and a howl was released from my mouth. After what seemed like an eternity, I had calmed down as I kissed my mother's forehead before I headed towards my father and kissed his cold cheeks softly. A sudden urge occurred as I began to turn around and sat on his chair as I noticed blood stains that was formed into words. "We're coming for you," was all it said. I clenched and unclenched my jaw before starting going through his drawers on the left and found nothing. I went through his right drawers and almost found nothing until my eyes laid themselves onto a bright white sheet of paper. I tilted my head in confusion before picking it up as I recognized my father's cursive handwriting. "If anything happens, BlueMoon will be your destination. The Alpha will take you under his wing. Stay safe. Love, Dad." My father was expecting the intruders. The BlueMoon Pack's Alpha was one of my father's oldest and trustworthy friends since Moon Goddess knows how long. They were allies for a very long time, even before my father's birth. My father used to tell me a lot of stories of him and BlueMoon's Alpha's adventures before they both took the Alpha positions, and that had led to them having their own responsibilities. I nodded to myself and took one last look at the golden picture frame he had on his wooden desk. It was a man who looked strong and a woman who was as kind as ever, smiling big at the camera. The little girl was sitting on top of the man's broad shoulders, around the age of 7, looking fierce, with her thin arms flexed. A small tear escaped my eye as I quickly wiped it away before putting the frame down so that the picture wasn't visible. I didn't dare to look back as my eyes was focused ahead, knowing that getting to BlueMoon was now my top priority. I didn't pack anything, but only brought a black cape with a hoodie attached before exiting the place where I grew up, where I was trained and loved, but most of all, where I had a pack that I called home. It has been 3 fucking days since I actually slept and had some real food. My stomach growls at every minute and my wolf was starting to lose her mind since I have not shifted. I needed to be cautious of rogues since they might sniff out my disgusting scent. My black jeans were now ripped from scratching myself on sharp branches that I couldn't see, and my white shirt was now stained by the times I have fell on the wet, dirty mud. My cape was long gone, lost to the rogues on the first day that I have exited my territory. I was absolutely sure that my brunette hair was now greasy and smelly as I could feel myself wanting to shower with the only water I had left for survival. I was near, but not near enough since I only had one more task to do to reach my destination. If I wanted to reach my destination fast enough, I would have to cross the Moon Blood's territory, since going around them would take at least another few days or so. I gulped, standing on the edge of their territory borders, contemplating in my head whether I should cross it or not. I heard many stories of the Moon Bloods that my father had told me when I was just a pup, mostly about the Alpha himself. He ripped many people's throats and heads off their bodies without hesitation, whoever trespassed his territory or whoever dared to harm his pack members. He had risen to take the Alpha position at the age of 18. I am sure that the Alpha is now around 24. Still heartless and merciless, but the benefit from being a monster is that his pack is the most successful one in the Lycan world. Having no choice since I had suffered long enough, I needed hospitality fast. I was willing to risk my life. I sucked in a breath and let one of my foot step over the borderline as my ears immediately picked up howls whom I assumed was wolves on duty, cursing under my breath at how good they were. I ran as fast as my legs could carry me, knowing that I had already wasted all of my energy on the past few days, pushing myself harder as I thought of the training days I had with the beta. Adrenaline kicked in and in the corner of my eyes, I dodged the thick trees and their branches that were in my way as I could already see multiple colored wolves running beside me, and on that note, my instinct was to shift, finding my way onto a small rock. I jumped on it and let my light gray wolf surface, fully shifting into the air as I picked up the noise of my filthy clothes, shredding into a million pieces. On all fours, she ran faster than I did in my human legs, turning left to right elegantly as she passed many thick trees. One of the wolves on the edge bumped into me, opening its mouth to reveal sharp, white canines, but my wolf dodged it quickly, running ahead of the wolf before kicking the wolf in the face with her hinds. I was getting tired for sure. The strength and adrenaline was already starting to wear off as I commanded my wolf to slow down because I knew that I couldn't make it. I came to halt, making the other wolves growl before circling around me dangerously and slowly as if observing my wolf. The heartbeat inside my chest was beginning to pump loudly, and I was sure with their enhanced hearings, they were able to hear it. My wolf whimpered at every growling wolf around me, intimidating her as a thought crossed my mind. I might as well, fucking get ripped into pieces. An unknown and amazing scent collided with my nostrils as my wolf suddenly lifted its head up, taking a big sniff of the air and exhaling slowly. No. It can't be. My wolf was starting to go into a frenzy at the magnificent scent. It was coffee mixed with the scent of the forest. My wolf closed its eyes slowly and tried to absorb the scent of what seems to be my mate. A loud and powerful growl that could make the earth shake made my wolf snap her eyes open as they found their way towards a midnight blue wolf with its dark brown eyes widening at me. I could hear my wolf chanting, but I distanced myself from her, distracted by the power of an alpha radiating off of him. But before I could shift back into my human form, the scenery became pitch black as I felt an elbow knock me unconscious. A mate is chosen by the moon goddess herself. They are supposed to be your life, your other half. After werewolves turn 16, they are allowed to find their own mate once they have shifted. They say having a mate is important because you feel like you have a meaning to your life and that you feel like you want to protect them even if it means risking your life for them. And if your other half dies, it would feel like someone has ripped the other half of your heart and somehow, in the end, you'll suicide to end the agony. They are supposed to be there when you are in need of help or when you are feeling discomforted. They are supposed to make you feel safe and loved like you have never been before. I've wanted to experience that for myself. It's a very strong bond, as they also say that the first mate will always be more significant than the second. I'm supposed to feel like I'm dying or in pain. Or maybe even dead. But I don't. My eyes fluttered open slowly, sneaking a peek but to only find myself staring at three big, bulky men whispering outside of what looks like a cell bar. My eyes widened once I tilted my head to the side, feeling the pain shoot through my body as I winced quietly. Apparently, it wasn't quiet enough, as all pair of eyes snapped their attention towards me as I quickly looked down at my body to see myself wearing a sky blue baggy t-shirt that covered, well, mostly everything. I lifted my head and glared at all three. What are you waiting for? Kill me. They chuckled humorlessly whilst looking intimidating. One of them spoke up. Please. I would have ripped your pretty little head off in just a millisecond if it wasn't for Alpha Aiden. I turned my attention towards the one who spoke. He had brunette hair and a well-structured face with a smirk plastered. Oh, how glorious would it be to wipe that stupid smirk off of that handsome face. I looked into his hazel eyes, knowing that I was talking to a beta. Why would the alpha save me? Should they just let me die? Idiot. But I knew the answer all too well. The beta seemed more annoyed than he was just a second ago, his eyes shifting towards a darker shade as I pushed down the urge to back away. He averted his dark hazel eyes away from me towards the brick wall before they flickered back to me. You're his mate. I scoffed. Thank you for stating the obvious. Having an alpha mate is, well, I wouldn't say terrible nor lucky, but they are more possessive than normal male wolves. All three growled lowly at me before they left me alone in the reeking, cramped cell. I examined the cell that I was currently having my vacation in. The moldy bricks were aging, and the cement of the ground were already decaying. The scent of the cell was like a dead body was being dumped in here and were rotted. I cringed at the thought of them actually doing such a horrific thing. I was suddenly pulled from my thoughts when the same amazing aroma collided with my nostrils once I heard the door open. My wolf was on alert as the figure approached my cell with heavy footsteps. My eyes wandered up to a man with muscled arms that were crossed against his chest, and I was certain he was taller than me by at least a head. Next to him, I saw a girl no older than my age. Standing beside him as a growl escaped my lips before I could stop it. I glared at the girl, whom looked terrified, and cursed at my inner wolf for being jealous already. My mate must have noticed because he cleared his throat. My blue eyes making their way towards him. "What is your name?" he asked in a sexy, masculine voice. I chuckled. "That's for me to know and for you to not." He growled. "You're lucky that I didn't kill you, mate. And am not lucky that I've been caught." I swear in his brown, chocolate eyes, I could see a glint of amusement flash by before it disappeared. He looked down at the brunette-haired girl who stood by his side, her body trembling visibly. "Julia, here. It will attend to your needs." He unlocked the cell bar easily. Rolling my eyes, I stood up to only find my stomach growling at me again, but that didn't stop me from wanting to escape. I lunged for the exit as my legs began to move their way towards the open door where light seeped in, but before I could even take another step, I was suddenly pulled back by a large hand, sending tingles through my arm. "Try again next time," he commented with a shake of his head, a ghost smile playing on his lips before he walked out of the cell dungeon, leaving me with Julia. "Nice to meet you," she stuttered. "There's no need for you to be afraid of me," I replied, giving her a small smile. "Now, how about we get some food?" She nodded quickly before taking my hand and dragged me outside the packed dungeon, where we were already making our way towards what looked like a mansion with only a few guards posted outside. I couldn't help but notice a few Moonbloods pack members give me weird stares, and some teenagers whispering to each other before giggling. "Don't worry about them. They don't know who you are, nor do they care until you are," announced Luna. I looked at Julia, who was only shorter than me by a bit, as she gave me a genuine, kind smile. "Race you." "Wow. That was easy," I said proudly as I looked behind to see Julia breathing, as if she was trying to absorb in all the oxygen. "How can you have so much energy inside of you?" she asked, panting as she tiredly opened the black double doors. "An alpha's daughter," I answered softly, pushing down the horrific memories. I was thankful she didn't ask any more questions. We both entered the spacious foyer with white-colored walls that almost reflected the light, as a huge chandelier was hanging between the two white spiral staircases on each side, with a red carpet placed on top. In between the staircases, a black circle rug was placed right under the chandelier, with a tall but small table that had a glass vase positioned in the middle with red roses. Behind the vase, not so far, there was two wooden doors that may lead to somewhere unknown. Perhaps Narnia. I was drooling at the sight of the beautiful house until Julia shoved me into another spacious room, as I quickly realized it was the kitchen. The kitchen was long and wide. The countertops were gray, as only four lined up in the middle, with a white marbled cover on top, with four stools that was lined up next to each other. Against the wall, the black double-door fridge was pinned against the white wall, as well as a sink. "What is this?" I asked, jaw dropped. "Yeah. That's my reaction when Alpha Aiden had informed me that I was going to work here from now on," Julia answered with a shrug, placing a bowl of spaghetti on the white marbled countertop. I quickly sniffed it out before running towards a stool and sat on it. Already digging into the bowl, whilst Julia wore a playful smile. "Wow. You're such a dog." We both laughed. A few minutes later, both of us were sitting in the very spacious lounge room on a white sofa that was indeed very comfortable as we both stared at a big black plasma screen that was attached to the white wall. "What's your name?" Julia asked out of the blue, breaking the silence between us. I studied her carefully, contemplating in my head whether to tell her or not, but I guess I could trust her. "Davina Rosales. Daughter of Alpha Nick and Luna Shay," I answered, shrugging. Julia's brown eyes widened as a very wide smile was starting to spread across her face. "Oh. That's why you look so familiar. I've heard so much about you." Before I could answer, the door busted open and the delicious scent walked in with the figure who was devilishly handsome. "Davina Rosales. H.M." Aiden walked in with a smirk plastered on his face as I glared at him. "You're excused, Julia." And with that, Julia immediately left, leaving me alone with the devil himself. It was time. I thought to myself, if I didn't want to live in a hellhole like this, then I knew what I had to do. But would my parents be proud of my choice? Will I be satisfied with it once everything was over and done with? And here I am, judging a book by its cover. "You're thinking about it, aren't you?" Aiden asked before growling lowly, his eyes darkening at the mere sight of me. I clenched my jaw. "You can't read my mind." "Go ahead. Do it." I was immediately shocked at his words. The way he just let those words free from his mouth without hesitating. But I knew better than that. He was trying to cover up his plead with his bitterness. I crossed my arms and shrugged as if that was my response. Aiden looked almost relieved before the cold facade fell over his face once again before moving towards one of the staircases. "Your room." He led the way as I followed behind, ascending the staircases to see a small but empty, spacious floor before he turned left to where countless doors were. My eyes passed every white door, except for one that was painted black. I tilted my head at it in confusion, but letting it slide as he led me to a white door and swiftly opened it, revealing a small room with a single bed that was placed beneath a wide window, covered by red curtains. The walls were white with a plush red carpet, positioned in the middle and in the corner of my eye. I caught a glimpse of a small wooden chair in the corner. Clenching my fists, I immediately stepped foot inside before slamming the door in his face before slumping against it. My ears picked up his growl, as I could feel movements coming from the door, whilst I sat there like a heavy rock. "Davina, let me in," he commanded. What did he want now? Growling lowly, I rose from my sitting position and took a few steps back from the door and stood in my fighting stance, preparing myself for the worst. If it means having to knock out the Alpha so I could get to BlueMoon, so be it. "You're not going to be serious," Aiden said, a frown appearing on his handsome face as he stood there, sighing. "You're weak. And you're just a big, bad alpha," I replied with a roll of my eyes. "Let's get this over and done with," he growled as he charged towards me whilst I ducked down right as he swung a fist at me before backing away from him, distancing myself. "Scared?" I growled, jumping on the bed. Waiting for him to come closer, then I pivoted around and used my left leg to kick him hard in the jaw as he fell to the ground. making a loud thud. I smirked in satisfaction before pretending to be really busy checking my ratchet nails. Me. Weak. You're funny. I didn't hear him stand up whilst I was checking my nails, but I suddenly got tackled down by a heavy body. Growling lowly, I tried moving myself away from the heavy weight, which only resulted in my legs trying to kick Aiden, who was smirking as he began to straddle my waist. Ignoring the intensifying electricity coursing through my entire body, I punched his jaw hard and whimpered at the pain as I looked at Aiden, who only arched an eyebrow at me. A flash of concern flashed across his face as I used that opportunity to lift one of my knees up, hitting him in the crotch as he yelped in pain, falling off of me before I quickly rose from my position. My inner wolf was going in a frenzy, yelling at me to stop, but I only pushed her down. I didn't need distractions at the moment. Aiden growled lowly, recovering from his blow as he made an attempt to grab me, but I sidestepped quickly, only to see his arm fall to the floor again. I suddenly snapped out of my imagination and remembered where I had to go and be. I grabbed the wooden chair in the corner and smashed it down on Aiden, who didn't even budge, but to only find the chair scatter onto the floor into a million pieces. His eyes became black, knowing that his wolf has completely taken over, as now he took one of the chair pieces into his hold and threw it at me like there was no care or worry in the world. Not ducking fast enough, I crashed into the wall. Pain engulfed my body as I began to whimper. When my body made contact with the floor, I could feel a shooting pain near my ribs as I clenched and unclenched my jaw before I let my hands travel downwards to my ribs, where the pain was starting to become too hard to endure. I screamed. Tears were threatening to escape as my eyes fluttered open, to only find myself staring at a man running his fingers through his brown hair and growling in frustration as if he was beating himself up about it. A concerned facial expression appeared onto his features, picking me up swiftly and gently in his arms. He sent a wave of electricity through my entire body once more. "Hold on. Please," he pleaded. There was only one thought that was running around in my head. Maybe I regret not rejecting him. Settling Davina down on the uncomfortable small hospital bed in one of the private rooms in the PAC hospital, the doctor immediately shoved me to the side, so he could start working on her. My wolf was miserable and defeated that he had done such thing to our mate, but I was more disappointed in myself for I had let him take complete control over me. When I met Davina in the woods, I could already sense her power and her amazing rose scent. It was captivating. She is a Rosales after all. Our future flashed before my eyes once we made eye contact, sending my wolf into a frenzy as he had the urge to go near her, but he only pushed that urge down. He immediately regretted his choice once he saw the beta attack her beautiful wolf. "I'm so fucking stupid," my wolf said, growling in frustration. I didn't reply to him, but clenched my fists together. It has been 4 hours since everything had happened, and not one mind link from the doctor informing me that she will be okay. I had hurt my mate. No. I almost killed her. "She'll be fine, Aiden." My beta reassured me for the 4th time in an hour as he sat down in front of my long, black, messy desk as he looked around at the paperwork that has been scattered in front of me. "Ace. I nearly killed her," I hissed, clenching my jaw together. "I nearly killed my fucking mate." "She attacked you first," Ace replied with a shrug. "She'll be fine. Have faith in her, wolf." I stared at the red, ripped open punching bag that had stuffing pouring out of it. Earlier, I had ordered one of the pack guards that were posted outside my house to fetch me it so I could release my anger and frustration, and to be honest, I did a pretty decent job. Davina Rosales is Alpha Nick's daughter, right? Ace asked, a frown appearing on his face. I nodded slowly, bemused. His pack has been quiet lately, Ace informed thoughtfully. There hasn't been any recent activities on their pack. And? I questioned, annoyed. I think we should check out their territory, Ace answered, confidently. He didn't attend to last night's meeting. We all know he never misses out on a meeting. And why would Davina run away from her family? He rambled on. It was good point for Ace to make. I sighed and nodded whilst rubbing my temples, approving his request. I gathered a group of pack fighters to tag along with Ace and I, just in case we needed backup. They filled 2 matte black Range Rovers. We were used to transporting ourselves to other territories since shifting back to our human form would be a hassle. After a few long hours, we finally arrived to the deserted Golden Dreams territory. We filed out the cars, one by one, as mixed, disgusting scents collided with our nostrils, our arms flying up to our noses on their own accord. I observed their cringed faces that was plastered onto everyone's face as we slowly made our way towards their pack grounds. My eyes widened at the horrific scene that came into view as I fought the urge to look away. The disgusting scene made my stomach turn upside down that I might as well soon throw up. I studied the scene closely, looking at many pale, lifeless bodies that were currently rotting on the ground. I made a hand movement to signal the fighters to examine the scene more thoroughly as Ace and I pinched our noses before we strolled towards the pack house, dodging dead bodies here and there. The pack living room was also filled with dead bodies, scattered everywhere on the ground. Dried blood was spilled almost everywhere and some were even splattered onto the peachy walls. Davina wouldn't have survived this, Ace informed quietly as his eyes swept across the room. She wasn't here when the attack started. We made our way towards the small hallway that led to Alpha Nick's office. Ace kicked the door open and another stench collided with our nostrils again as we pinched our noses harder than before. My eyes ran over Alpha Nick's dead boy that was pinned against the wall. A knife darted right through his chest as Luna Shea was laying lifelessly on the floor, her head detached from her body. I gave Ace an approval nod to look around Alpha Nick's things as I took a seat behind Alpha Nick's desk before picking up the golden picture frame to find a portrait of his family. I examined the picture closely. My eyes focused on the little girl, whom was flexing as a smile was starting to spread across my face. I took the picture out of the frame and folded it twice before putting it safely into my black leather jacket pocket whilst examining the bloody words that were written on the past Alpha's table. Ace, look at this, I called as Ace hurried over. His hazel eyes widened. Someone's serious about this. I ripped open the drawers on both sides before finding nothing that captured my interest, so I made my way upstairs until I reached the 3rd floor. The sign was swinging on the wall. Unmated she-wolves. It said. Many pictures of grinning pack members were hung against the peachy colored walls as I made my way past a few wooden doors, trying to find the last name that looked familiar. I stopped in front of a door that had Rosales engraved on the wooden door as I slowly and cautiously, as if something might spring from behind, opened the door. The strong, addicting scent of my mate suddenly collided with my nostrils. Her room was ravishing. The walls were painted a violet color. A full-length mirror was in the corner of the room along with a vase of roses on her bedside table. I walked slowly towards her single bed that was positioned under a small window and carefully sat down on it, as if I might break it. A ghost smile was playing on my lips knowing that my mate had grew up in a place where she was loved. I looked beside me to find a pink picture album sitting on her pillow. Frowning, I picked it up carefully as if it was something delicate and flicked through many pictures of Davina and her parents. Alpha Aiden. Miss Rosales have woken up and demands to be freed. The voice of my pack doctor rung inside my head as I swiftly jumped to my feet and raced towards the car. Before driving off, I noticed my pack fighters burying the high-rank wolves along with the Alpha and Luna deep in the forest, whereas the rest of them were burned in a pit of fire. I paced back and forth in front of the hospital bed with the pink album in my hands, waiting for her to wake up as the doctor stood in the corner of the room, emotionless whilst checking the clipboard he was holding. "You told me she was awake," I yelled at the trembling pack doctor. "She was for a bit," he replied, softly. My wolf was a bit calm since she was now resting peacefully. The doctor was about to say something when Davina started sniffing, tears streaming down her cheeks. My heart broke at the sight as I swiftly walked towards her, grabbing hold of her hand before widening my eyes at the feel of the tingles shooting down my arm. Her blue eyes slowly opened and I swear to the moon goddess, I could get lost in them, but before I knew it, she pulled her small hand back. "Don't touch me, devil." My inner wolf whimpered at the nickname as I masked my emotions. "I'm sorry, Davina," I whispered, reaching for her small, trembling hand again, but this time, I was surprised to see her not resisting. Her eyes averted away from mine and towards the pink album sitting beside her head as her blue eyes widened in recognition. I reached for the pink album with my free hand and brought it to her free hand. Her blue eyes were now welling with tears. My heart pounded loudly against my chest as I set her hand free before she reached for the album, then hugged it closely to her chest. The pack doctor cleared his throat loudly. I had forgotten he was there as I snapped my attention to him for ruining the moment. Our moment. "What is it?" I questioned with a snap. "Davina, your left rib is broken and your wolf is too weak to heal you, so you may need your mate to help you with the healing." The doctor spoke softly, ignoring me. Davina nodded. "Has not touching me," she replied, glaring at me suspiciously. I chuckled humorlessly before I picked up Davina in my arms. Her wide blue eyes filled with shock as I gently cradled her in my arms before lowering myself onto the bed, with her practically on top with me. "Apparently, he already is." The doctor laughed softly as Davina's cheeks grew pink before looking down. "You're excused," I told the doctor as he immediately bowed before exiting the room. Davina closed her eyes, her heavy breathing fanning my neck as I sucked in a breath, letting my eyes assess every feature of her. She was beautiful. "Ah, Aiden has a caring heart," my wolf questioned with a tease, satisfied that our mate is near. "Are you done staring at me?" she asked, her eyes still shut as I chuckled softly. Her arm was now draped over my chest. One of her legs was in between the both of mine as I could feel the electricity and tingles shoot everywhere within my body, welcoming the feeling. My right hand rested on her head as my fingers massaged her scalp as she sighed in content. My left arm was wrapped around her small waist. I miss them, Davina whispered, tilting her head upwards as she looked at me. Her eyes were welling with tears once more. I knew who she was talking about. Her shaky blue eyes were asking if she could grieve whilst I nodded in response. As soon as I nodded, she immediately broke into tears. No longer than a minute. My shirt was drenched with her salty tears, her hand clutching my shirt as she wept. And I know that this was destroying her pride because she was displaying her vulnerability to me. I kissed the top of her head repeatedly. Before I knew it, she dozed off to a peaceful sleep as I stared down at her beautiful face. I was about to doze off, joining my mate as I pushed down the thought of Davina being in danger. Maybe I do have something to live for now. I lifted my heavy eyelids to only find myself squinting at the bright sunlight as fatigue engulfed me. I moved my hands on one side of the empty bed that had once been on a hard chest to only be disappointed since Aiden was no longer underneath me. I could feel the loneliness creep inside my body. I sighed, turning around carelessly to only find myself wincing at the small pain from my ribs. "You're awake," Julia exclaimed drowsily from the armchair that was positioned in the corner of the room. She swiftly rose from it and ran towards me, hugging me lightly as if she was careful not to cause any more pain. "Can I shower?" I asked bluntly, rubbing my eyes. I was not a morning person. Julia tilted her head in confusion before sniffing the air, then immediately cringed. "You sure do stink. Let's go back to the house." Half an hour later, I have found myself descending the staircase with a white towel wrapped around my body to only find Julia watching Teen Wolf on the huge plasma screen whilst digging into the popcorn. "I don't understand why they don't have mates," Julia groaned in disappointment. "And Scott isn't even a real wolf. I should be part of the cast." "Do you have spare clothes?" I asked whilst approaching her with a small smile spreading across my face. She turned her head towards me and shot me a wink before jumping off the sofa and making her way towards a room that was right at the back of the living room. A few minutes later, she emerged with a huge black plain t-shirt and a white Calvin Klein underwear before tossing it to me. "It's your mate's and I'm sure he won't mind you borrowing them," she replied with a shrug as I caught it swiftly before ascending the stairs once again. Minutes later, I descended the stairs again to see Julia hiding behind the long white couch as Aiden and his beta walked in with a few of the other high-rank wolves, following behind whilst discussing some business. I tilted my head in confusion when I didn't receive a single glance from him, or even a greeting, but I knew he had sensed me, evident of his clenched fists at his sides. I caught a glimpse of Aiden and his men go inside the room which was located in between the two staircases. "What's wrong?" I asked Julia, whom had been hiding behind the sofa, as her eyes widened before grabbing my arm and pulled me into the living room, panting as if she just ran 2 miles. "Is he gone?" she questioned in a quiet voice as she inhaled and exhaled. "Who?" "Beta Ace." I arched an eyebrow. "What? Are you scared of him?" Her mouth dropped at my question and shook her head. "No. He's my mate, but I don't want that piece of ass to know." Her words were slowly registering in my head, and before it could even finish registering, it hit me. "What?" "Shh," she hissed. "Isn't he able to sniff you out or something?" I masked my scent, she answered with a proud smile. We were 9 and he was like my best friend. And you know, he was the next in line to be the beta of this pack, so he thought it was too good for me and he totally abandoned me. I watched Julia pout like a child as I laughed at how childish she could be. You're still holding a grudge. Huh? She nodded with pride. I chuckled until an idea finally collided with my head as my eyes widened. Does Aiden have a car? Julia smirked. A Ferrari? Why, he's at it. Why? If it was your car, you would be bragging about it right now. I teased as she nodded. Why? She repeated. I need to go to BlueMoon's. I answered with a shrug as excitement engulfed my body. You're leaving us? She questioned whilst widening her sad eyes. Before my pack was murdered, I found a note in one of my father's drawers saying that I should be there. I answered quietly. Her eyes were now filled with pity as she nodded in understanding. The Alpha himself will kill me, she muttered. I smiled. Join me. Julia bit her lip and looked around the house. Her eyes now filled with fear as she clasped her hands together. I guess I could get out of the territory for a bit. Davina. Don't leave our mate. Please. My inner wolf begged sadly as I sighed. I approached the front door and sighed again, craning my neck to take a glimpse of the double doors that Aiden had entered through. My heart aching inside of me. I got it. She shouted, whispered as she dangled the keys to Aiden's car on her index finger. I nodded and quickly grabbed it without hesitation, taking her arm out the door before I coming face to face with one of the pack guards whom have stepped in front of us. A blank facial expression plastered. Luna Davina. Where are you going? The guard asked in a monotone. I was about to answer when Julia interrupted me. We're going for a walk. The guard hesitated before nodding, then positioned himself against the house again. Julia bit her lip and quickly observed the area around us before leading me to the back of the house where 2 garages came into sight. Julia swiftly unlocked the door and turned on the lights, revealing a gray, sleek Ferrari and next to it, a beautiful black Audi. My mouth dropped open at the sight of the 2 gorgeous cars. That's the beta's car, Julia mentioned, pointing at the Audi. I looked at the key and unlocked the car when a loud beep echoed throughout the whole entire room. I got into the driver's leather cream-colored seat and put the key into ignition as the engine started up, roaring like a tiger. I waited for Julia to get inside as well, but to only find that she unlocked her mate's car. We both lowered our tinted windows as she shouted, "So they can't catch us." I laughed and nodded at her brilliant idea. At the top of the car was a button to the garage door, so I pressed it as Julia did the same. We gave each other knowing smirks before we pressed our feet onto the pedal, the engine roaring loudly multiple times until we saw a bright clearing. 2 built figures with a few others stood in the middle of the clearing with angry facial expressions. Aiden looked at me with a very pissed-off look as I made his car roar once again, satisfaction engulfing me. Go! I shouted as Julia and I both pressed our foot onto the accelerator, making the car move forward. Once the car started moving towards the small group, Aiden and his men swiftly split into 2 groups and moved aside. Whilst driving past him, I heard a loud growl rumble from his chest as I stuck my middle finger out the window and into the air. Julia and I speeded our way onto the dirt road where it was created for vehicles. Driving until we were out on the deserted road. It wasn't long until we reached the BlueMoon's territory since we basically just speeded our way there. Julia and I parked our fancy cars just a few meters away from the pack grounds where two pack guards approached us cautiously. "Nice ride." One of them, with ash blonde hair, commented as I gave him one of my sweet smiles. "Thank you," I responded. "I kind of stole it, but that's not why we're here today." "Why are you here?" The other one, that had black hair, asked with a frown. "I'm here to see Alpha Sean," I answered, my tone now filled with seriousness. I could hear Julia shuffling nervously behind me as I gave her a squeeze on the shoulder. A sign that everything will be okay, and she didn't need to be afraid. "What is your relationship with the Alpha?" the same person asked. "I'm the daughter of Alpha Nick," I answered again, annoyed that he was asking too many questions and that he didn't recognize me. Both of them looked at each other, stunned before nodding as they lead us towards the large pack house that I was familiar with. There were a few people who nodded in my direction. Only the ones who recognized me whilst the others who didn't shot me glares. Julia and I were both led to a narrow hallway. Passing photographs of the Alpha and his pack members were hung against the sky. Blue walls. "Hessen here." I nodded as both of the pack guards made their way back to where we entered. I knocked on the door twice, then 3 times. A code that the Alpha and I had created when I was young. The door was immediately flung open and a brunette-haired man with muscled arms stood with his arms wide open as I laughed and ran into his embrace. "How are you, my precious girl?" Alpha, Sean asked, surprised as we broke apart. "Good, I think," I answered, giving him a smile. "This is my friend, Julia. She's from Moon blood." Alpha Sean's eyes widened. "Don't tell me. Did you step foot into their territory?" I nodded. "You told me not to tell you, but..." "Guilty." "How are you still alive?" he asked in amazement as Julia and I took a seat on the brown leather sofa that was positioned in front of his desk. "Long story short, I'm Aiden's mate," I answered with a nervous smile. A smile spread across his face as his eyes perked up. "I'm so happy for you, but what brings you here?" I looked down at my fingers to find them fidgeting with each other as the horrific memory of my parents emerged into my mind. "They're dead." "Who is?" Alpha Sean asked softly. "Everyone," I trailed off, wiping a stray tear. "Golden dream." Alpha Sean slammed his fist onto his desk, frightening Julia and I as his brown eyes filled with sadness and anger. He stood up, paced around the room as his long fingers ran through his brunette hair roughly, absorbing the information I had just informed him with. Julia was obviously trembling with fear at just the sight of him. "What is it?" I asked, confused as a thought crossed my mind. Maybe he knows something about it. "Nothing. When did this happen, Davina?" 5 or 6 days ago," I answered, unsure. "And where were you when this happened?" "I was at the mall, shopping for groceries," I answered, still bemused. "Okay. Good. I arched an eyebrow at him and was about to ask him how was that a good thing when someone knocked on the door. Julia and I both turned around in our seats to find a boy and a woman standing there. Confused. But once my eyes met the woman's blue ones. Her eyes welled with tears as she quickly pushed past her mate and engulfed me into her arms. "Oh my wolf. I'm so glad you're here. I've missed you and your parents so much." "Hi Luna Debbie." I greeted her softly as her arms tightened around my neck at every word I breathed out. "Okay. Can't breathe." She unwrapped her arms around my neck and took a step back. Embarrassed. The young boy who looked around 8 was suddenly lifted into the air by his father, Alpha Sean, as he pecked a small kiss on his cheek. A memory of my father crossed my mind. A tear slid down my cheek as I swiftly wiped it away, hoping no one spotted that. "This is Brooke. My son," Alpha Sean said with a smile. "Brooke. This is Davina." Brooke has inherited his father's brunette hair and his mother's dashing blue eyes. Knowing that he'll become a strong alpha in the future, just like his father. I gave Brooke a kind smile as he returned the same. Luna Debbie whipped around, turning her attention to me as she sniffed the air until her blue eyes met my own. "Why is Alpha Aiden's scent on you?" "Well," I trailed off with a shrug, looking down at Aiden's baggy t-shirt and realized I wasn't wearing any shorts but just an underwear. My eyes widened as I could feel my cheeks heat up in embarrassment. "I'm his mate." "Darling," Alpha Sean said, his hands resting on his mate's shoulder, like it was something delicate. "Alpha Nick and Luna Shay are dead." It took several minutes for Luna Debbie to process the information in her head. As soon as it was registered, she collapsed onto the floor and broke into tears before I looked away. Not wanting to shed any more tears, for I have shed enough. 2 arms suddenly engulfed me again as my eyes widened and found Luna Debbie, Brooke and Alpha Sean already huddling around me, leaving Julia to stand there awkwardly. The feeling was too overwhelming, so I suddenly lost it and cried again in their arms. This time I felt comfort. "You don't have to be strong all the time, Davina," Luna Debbie whispered in my ear. "You're a strong woman. Your parents are so proud of you." We broke apart, and I nodded, knowing that she was the wisest woman I have ever known. "Thank you." Before Alpha Sean could respond, one of his pack guards that Julia and I had talked to early darted inside the room, his chest heaving up and down. Alpha Aiden has entered the territory and demands to see his mate." Alpha Sean sighed heavily before placing Brooke down as Julia and I followed him outside. Aiden and Ace was standing outside the pack house with their men growling at Alpha Sean's beta, Luke, and his men. My scent must have collided with Aiden's nostrils because his black eyes suddenly traveled towards me, and at that moment, I knew he was in discomfort. As if on their own accord, my legs ran towards him as he swiftly caught me in his strong arms, holding me tightly as if it was our last seconds on earth. His face nestled in the crook of my neck as I could hear him breathe in my scent, calming down his wolf. I could feel my inner wolf howl in excitement since we were now back in our mate's arms, and to be honest, I missed the feeling of his arms around me even though we weren't apart for that long. Aiden and I both know that whenever we're together, or even do little things like hug, the bond between us will be getting stronger and stronger. Once we pulled away, I gave him a small smile as he gave me a cold stare, my stomach dropping, knowing that I have pissed him off. I turned back to find Julia scolding at Ace, who was whimpering beneath her index finger. "I think Ace found his mate," I said, turning around to see Aiden nod. Emotionless. I walked away from Aiden as he growled once more, but I gave him a cold stare to shut him up, but all he did was growl even louder. I reached Alpha Sean and hugged him tightly as I could feel him do the same, knowing that he'll always be there for me. Almost like a father. The hug didn't last much longer since I could practically sense Aiden right behind me, feeling his intensifying glare. I looked up to see a hint of jealousy flash in his eyes as I chuckled quietly. "Alpha Aiden. Davina is in danger and you must protect her," Alpha Sean warned, making my smile fade into thin air before he walked away. His pack guards and Beta Luke following behind as they tried to calm down their pack members, who was a bit shaken up by Aiden's outburst. I turned around to see Aiden, who looked distant, and I guessed he caught me staring at him because he glared at me before saying, "Get in the car." "Davina." I refused to move. "Now." A shiver crawled up my spine as I swiftly hurried towards his Ferrari. On the way, I caught a glimpse of Julia already in Ace's car. I could see his men file into a matte black Range Rover before the three cars instantly drove off BlueMoon's territory. I bit my lip and gulped as I looked out the window, not daring to look at Aiden. The car held a lot of tension and awkwardness in the air, but that didn't stop me from taking a nap. The door slammed shut behind me right after I sauntered into the large living room before sitting down nervously on the white sofa. I observed Aiden as he paced back and forth with the same pissed-off expression, his two arms behind his back. My heartbeat suddenly increased. My blue eyes followed his tense body, a headache starting to form as I instantly closed my eyes for a moment, stopping myself from observing the repetitive steps before opening them. The silence was deadly, as if it was going to eat me alive. "I'm sorry. You're such an idiot," Aiden shouted, interrupting my apology as he halted in his steps and turned to face me before starting to approach me cautiously, and I must admit, it was pretty intimidating. Frightened that he might break more bones of mine again, I rose from the sofa and slowly backed away, keeping my eyes focused on him. His growl was loud and furious, making my feet halt in their places as I gulped and tried leveling my growl with his, but failed to do so. "You're telling me you cannot level your growl with his?" My inner wolf whispered in disappointment. "You're an alpha's daughter. Woman up." Wow. And I thought she was backing up our mate. "I'm sorry," I repeated, trying to sound more calm. "Sorry isn't good enough," he replied, his voice cold and blank as if holding no meaning to it. "What if you got hurt? You're such an idiot." I growled at the insult and didn't even give two shits about the next words I was going to say. Davina Rosales. Reject a Mayans. But before I could finish my sentence, he interrupted me with a low growl, a cold shiver running down my spine as he reached for me and grabbed my arm, gripping it hard as he pushed me against the wall. My heart instantly stops, yet my wolf stirred inside me with excitement at the touch of his canines on the flesh of my neck. "Aiden, you don't know what you're doing," I said, trying not to anger him more than he already was. "Just back away." I knew I was trembling uncontrollably under his touch. "It's time to make it official," he whispered in my ear as I could practically hear a smirk along with his words. "You're mine." My body was already betraying me as it melted under his touch, and my wolf wanted to give in already. He knew that I was distracted and had taken advantage of it since I could feel his sharp canines pierce through my sensitive flesh. I moaned in both pain and pleasure, my voice echoing throughout the whole entire house as I could feel my body tremble even more. My wolf howling in excitement. The heat traveled around my body as if it was on fire, and I could feel my blood boil. My mind is a complete blur now, and I could feel the weight inside as if something or someone was invading my privacy. My mouth parts open again, and before I could stop it, I released a painful howl as I could feel the heavy weight shatter inside of me. Marked. Aiden's voice rings inside my head, and I know that he has completed one part of the bond. My body still trembles as I could feel the fire inside of me burst, knowing that this is a reaction since Aiden had forcefully marked me instead of giving him my consent. This means that it will take a few hours until the bond settles over me. Meaning, yes, I will be in so much fucking pain and be an over-emotional werewolf bitch like human girls on their periods. If I was awake. After females, wolves are marked. They will go through the second stage of the blonde, which is heat, making sure that they lure in their mate to make sure that the bond is completed. But now that I have been marked, he is allowed inside my head and has access to my emotions. I felt a sting course around my body, knowing that his tongue has licked over the new mark he had created on my neck. My body suddenly grew heavy, and the pressure of sleep was starting to stand out in my mind. My eyelids were getting heavier by the second, and before I could say another word, they fluttered close as I welcomed oblivion. I tossed and turned on a comfortable bed, causing a very painful ache course around my entire body as I released a small groan. I blinked a few times drowsily, letting my eyes adjust to the lighting before inspecting everything that was in sight. My eyes danced around the black walls. A very enormous window that has replaced one side of the room with black curtains drawn together. My eyes lifted themselves to find a large black chandelier hanging from the ceiling with little small lights installed around it. My eyes caught sight of a mini glass table, with two comfortable-looking chairs on each side just against the curtain-drawn window, a few meters apart from the bed. I frowned and rubbed my eyes, making sure that the beautiful room that I was in wasn't a dream. "Julia, what are you doing here?" I asked, bemused at the sight of Julia inside my room. As if hearing my thoughts, Aiden's voice rung inside my head. "You're in my room." My heart skipped a beat at his words and at his voice as I quickly inspected his room again, looking around in awe. It was such a nice room for a monstrous alpha. I took a big sniff of the air, my wolf howling in relaxation as she dared me to inhale his addicting scent again. "Alpha Aiden told me to check up on you." Julia answered my previous question, pulling me out of my own thoughts before retrieving a white tablet from her pocket before picking up a glass of water on one side of the bedside table that had a large lamp positioned on it. "This should help with the pain." I nodded, grabbing the tablet and popping it into my mouth right before I chugged down the glass of water, swallowing the tablet along with the refreshing water. I felt completely relaxed as I gave Julia a small smile to only find her looking nervous. Confusion starts to creep back into me. "What's wrong?" "Remember how I went to BlueMoon's with you?" she asked, shrugging as she lowered herself onto the edge of the king-sized double bed. I nodded. Well, Alpha Aiden had finally realized that his beta is my mate, and now I have to learn how to fight and everything, she answered, groaning in annoyance. "That is my punishment." I bit the insides of my cheek from smiling. Tell her that she should appreciate it or I would have her executed. Aiden's voice rung inside my head again, as I jumped at the sound of his voice. And you don't like to fight? I questioned, ignoring Aiden. I mean, I don't know. She answered with a fond smile. It's just that I've been known to assist people. Ace is your teacher, right? She nodded mischievously. I have to spend more time with that idiot, but don't worry. He's slowly making it up to me. I laughed and kicked off the white blankets before looking down at my outfit to only see the same outfit that I had wore just yesterday. Julia. I need new clothes. Julia squealed in delight and started nodding. She suddenly stops when she remembered something. We can't leave without the Alpha's permission. I arched a brow at her. Where's Aiden? She puts a finger on her chin and actually thought deeply before answering. He's downstairs with Ace, discussing something with the third in command. I nodded and swiftly got off the bed, feeling the soft plush black rug underneath my feet before running down the stairs with Julia hot on my heels as we impatiently knocked on the double doors to his office. Come in, Aiden shouted, growling in annoyance. The door flew open and the sight of the room captured my attention along with Aiden's scent. The colors of the wall were pure white with 2 full bookcases on each side of the walls. A long black leather sofa was positioned in front of Aiden's long, black, tidy desk. The 3 men looked surprised at Julia and his grand entrance. Aiden's brown eyes widened at me in surprise. Yes. Luna Divina? Ace questioned, standing up along with their third in command, bowing their head in submission. Oh. Don't worry about me, I answered, waving them off. Julia and I just wanted to let you know that we're going shopping. Why? Aiden questioned, dumbfounded. I scoffed. I don't want to wear your baggy clothes for the rest of my life. He cleared his throat and motioned for me to come over as he stood up, sighing heavily. I grinned in satisfaction as I stopped right in front of him, feeling all pairs of eyes on me whilst I crossed my arms and waited for Aiden's next move. Surprisingly, he handed me his credit card and gave me a small, sexy smirk as if luring me to jump into his arms, but I stopped myself from doing so. I faked a smile in return before turning around on my heels, then grabbed Julia's arm, whom was glaring at Ace the whole entire time as we raced out of the room. After changing into a pair of gray sweats and a black jumper that was also owned by Aiden, we made our way outside to see 2 men dressed in all black, nervousness written all over their faces. Once they sniffed us, they quickly bowed their heads in submission as I chuckled, knowing that they thought it was their alpha since I was wearing his clothes. Hello, boys. What can I do for you today? I asked, arching an eyebrow at the both of them with a hint of amusement in my voice. They both swiftly looked up, surprised to hear a feminine voice, as they gave each other confused glances. The one with black hair answered first. We are your personal bodyguards from now on, Luna, and we are commanded by Alpha Aiden. I groaned and stomped my foot like a little child, sighing in frustration as both black-haired and auburn-haired men watched me with a small smile. I'm not going to run away, and I certainly don't need babysitters, I said into the mind link between Aiden and I. For protection, he replied bluntly before cutting the mind link connection. I nodded as they led us to a black Range Rover before the four of us entered the car, then drove towards the mall. Once we arrived, I quickly scrambled outside, to breathe in the fresh air. When the air collided with my nostrils, I immediately cringed since it's been a long time. I last went to the mall and the last that I had went. I immediately regretted it. I knew Aiden could hear my thoughts, but right now, I just didn't care. My eyes met Julius as we gave each other our mischievous grins before disappearing into multiple stores with my bodyguards hot on our heels. After 4 long hours, Julia and I were exhausted from running to store, going into change rooms and dancing to songs that were being played in the background. I mean, one time, Julia and I stepped into Forever 21 and the song Beautiful Soul by Jesse McCartney was playing and we just lost ourselves to the music. When I mean losing ourselves to the music, I mean dancing around the store and lip-syncing dramatically as we received dirty looks from a few staff and laughs from a few customers. It felt good to have someone to laugh and go wild with. "Are you hungry?" Luna Divina, the black-haired man, whose name I learnt was Danny, asked as he brought me out of my own thoughts. "Yes, I am," I answered, realizing that my stomach has been growling at me. "And please, just call me Divina." The Luna title was still foreign to me. "Subway?" Danny questioned, pointing to the corner store that had the word Subway written in big. I nodded cheerfully as I walked in front of the group with a whole load of shopping bags from different stores, weighing on my arms along with Danny, the auburn-haired man, whose name I learnt was Ian, and Julia, who had half of her bags and half of mine on both of her arms. "Actually," I started, turning around to face the trio who looked at me, bemused. "Why don't you both put these in the car and meet us back at Subway?" Danny and Ian looked at each other with doubtful glances before nodding as Julia and I handed all our shopping bags to them, who carried it all with ease. "See you in 5. Julia and I chorused together as we both strolled towards Subway, arm in arm. When the door chimed open, the ringing of the bell faded from my ears, for a very familiar scent suddenly collided with my nostrils, and once again, it was a scent I didn't want to deal with anymore. "No fucking way," I whispered. My eyes instantly snapped their attention towards the corner of the store, where the scent was coming from. "What's the matter?" Julia asked as she pulled me towards the cash register, whilst I pulled Aiden's black hood over my head in an attempt to hide my face. "And you know it's not sunny in here, so you don't need the hood. Just hurry up with the order," I hissed quietly as Julia placed both of her hands in the air in surrender before asking, "What do you want?" "I lost my appetite," I answered as she shrugged in response before turning around to face a smiling young woman. In the corner of my eye, I could see the small group of men walk in my direction. My heartbeat quickened whilst I moved closer to Julia, who was staring at me as if I was hallucinating. Once the men walked out of Subway, I took off my hood and let out a breath I didn't know I had been holding on to. "I just got a mind link from Danny and he says he wants to meet them outside," she said with a soft smile. "Alpha is angry that you have been out for too long." Julia chuckled as she took her order and paid for the good. I nodded as we both headed outside to see Danny and Ian leaning against the bench with a couple of girls swarming around them like a bunch of bees. I could already see Danny and Ian look uncomfortable as they tried moving forward, but to only have one of the girls push them back. I sucked in a breath as a cold shiver ran down my spine, as I felt an oh so familiar touch on my shoulder. turning me around quickly to only meet the face that I had been avoiding. The man in front of me snarled viciously as I took a step back whilst Julia quickly ran over to Danny and Ian, alerting them on the situation. I knew the man. He was the one I punched repeatedly in the jaw as the purple bruises happened to still be there. I glared at him, but to only see him smirk as a couple of his friends began to make an appearance behind him. "You should be far away from me, girl, after what you have done to my friend and I." He spoke as he clenched his fists at his side. Angrily. "What the hell do you think you're doing here?" I scoffed. "I apparently live here now." I answered harshly as I could feel the presence of Danny and Ian from behind, feeling the confidence rise within me. He looked behind me and saw Danny and Ian growl quietly as he smirked, showing rotten teeth. "And you've brought friends?" "Sure," I snapped in response. "Well, I'm going to have to deal with you. Including the don't I?" he questioned as his friends laughed humorlessly. Tyler. The boys look so childish," one of his friends commented, making me snarl. "And you speak like a teenage boy," I replied, making his friends spit in my face. I gagged at the slimy thing on my face as I slowly wiped it off with Aiden's sleeve. My inner wolf growled, now on high alert, as she pushed herself to surface, wanting to shift and rip their heads off their body. All hell has already broken loose for Ian and Danny, for they both lunged at the man's friends, punching the shit out of them. I decided to join, knowing that I needed to help them out, both as a friend and a Luna, until reality slammed into me. We were in a place where we were surrounded by humans. "Stop!" I shouted, but both Ian and Danny disobeyed my commands. This time I used my alpha tone that was already rising in my throat. "Stop!" Yet the humans were still walking around busily, minding their own business. All men looked at me like I was a crazy witch, but Tyler's eyebrows narrowed in as he grinned mischievously. "Now this has gotten so much better." I frowned at the comment as he grabbed my hood, lifting me up into the air as Julia tried lunging for him, but to only be knocked out by one of his men. I growled loudly, not caring. I was exposing myself to a bunch of humans, and tried clawing at them, but to only find myself clawing the air. I heard Ian and Danny's groans, already sensing the fact that they have been beaten up as Tyler started walking towards the woods. I felt the hood tighten around my neck as I started choking, my lungs closing up but desperate for air. I could feel every breath slip out of my grasp. I grabbed onto the jumper and tried pulling it downwards, but Tyler's large hand tightened around the hood and gave it a good squeeze as my inner wolf howled for oxygen. Once we were in the woods and far from the crowded mall, Tyler and his men threw us to the ground harshly as I crashed into one of the trees before the pain soared through my back. I gasped for oxygen that were needed to keep me alive as Danny reached out for me, patting my back gently as Julia, whom had regained her consciousness, looked at me with concern, and Ian were already growling at the men. Once I've gained control of my breathing, I jumped to my feet and let my eyes sweep across my surroundings to only find Julia and Ian already in their wolf forms. "Wolves. I see." Tyler smirked like he had been expecting it this whole entire time. I started to panic, knowing that now 5 humans know of the wolves' existence. But my panic began to fade once Tyler and his men growled in response and began to shift. I heard bones crack and clothes shred into pieces as their human bodies morphed into shapes of large wolves, no bigger than an alpha. How is this possible? I questioned quietly as I could hear Danny shift into his wolf behind me. You smelt like humans. It's called disguising our scent. One of Tyler's friends that I hadn't realized were still in human form, but to only shift a few moments later after answering my question. My eyes widened as they met each and every red pair of eyes. Then it hit me. They were rogues. Rogues were wolves who had either been kicked out of their own packs or had run away from them. They are especially dangerous as individuals, having no heart at all, as they could rip you into pieces without a second thought. Trust me. I had experience with them when they attacked my old pack, but to only fail miserably. I sighed heavily and plastered on a brave face as I let my wolf surface, ripping Aiden's jumper and sweats into a million pieces. I growled lowly as Tyler and his men did the same in response. A dark brown wolf lunged for Julia, but to only see Ian's hinds kick his face. I was about to lunge for Tyler until a loud, powerful growl, with many more echoing it, stepped out of the dark shadows. My wolf whipped its head around at the familiar scent to see a large midnight blue wolf growl along with a tan-colored one right beside it. Leading a group of multicolored wolves, I witnessed when I first entered Aiden's territory. I made eye contact with Aiden as his eyes were now pitch black, lunging for Tyler without hesitation with his men along. I was shoved back by Danny, who was now standing in front of me in a protective stance, knowing that it was his job and duty to protect me. Behind Danny's big wolf, I heard many painful whimpers and loud howls echo throughout the whole forest as I wheeled myself around Danny's wolf to only find Aiden ripping Tyler's head off. My wolf and I whimpered and gagged at the horrific sight as Aiden turned around to meet me in the eyes. Again, I found myself staring into those pure black eyes that swirled with anger as it sent shivers down my spine in just milliseconds. He looked away to only rip Tyler apart limb by limb as now I understood the stories that my father had told me about the cold and merciless Alpha. In a matter of minutes, Ace and the pack fighters were back in their human form. Shirtless, may I add, throwing dead bodies far into the woods, but only left one injured as Aiden's wolf trudged behind a large tree and shifted. I caught a glimpse of Ace hugging Julia's wolf tightly, calming her down as she shifted back into her human form in his arms. He growled at his men who was walking past them, knowing that Ace didn't want other men to look at his own mate whilst she was naked. Aiden came out of the tree in black shorts and two long black t-shirts in his hands as he handed it to Ace, whom helped Julia up and quickly slipped the t-shirt over her small body. I looked at Aiden, who had an unreadable facial expression, as he placed the last t-shirt in my mouth carefully and pointed towards the tree he had just emerged from. I made my way behind the tree and shifted uncomfortably before slipping the t-shirt over my own body. Davina, come out this instant, I heard Aiden's firm voice say as I slowly walked out of the tree to only find his brown eyes significantly soften. I couldn't help hold my tears back as they broke through my barrier and were already streaming down my cheeks. I didn't know why I was crying. I knew that I was crying over nothing. It suddenly hit me that it was one of those over-emotional things that the mark was creating. Aiden walked to me and engulfed me in his strong arms along with his scent as I snuggled in closer and felt the tingles shoot everywhere within my body, burying my face in his chest. Did you know them? Was the first thing Aiden asked when we reached his office along with Ace and Julia. I gulped and nodded. How? I bit my lip and looked at Aiden, who only held an emotionless facade. I ran into them back in my territory, when I was at the mall. We got into a really small fight with his other friend, but he wasn't at the fight today. I swear they smelt like humans, so I just assumed they were. At least, they appeared to be. Aiden nodded before turning towards Ace, whom had been staring at me with concern written all over his face. Aiden ran his fingers through his brunette hair, making him appear sexier as he retrieved a notepad from the bottom drawer. "May I say something, Alpha?" Ace's masculine voice asked, keeping his hard and unreadable gaze on me. In the corner of my eye, I caught a glimpse of Aiden nodding. "It appears to be that the rogue group was working for someone," he said. My eyes widened as Aiden focused his attention on him, before he continued. "Whilst Luna Divina was out, someone had the nerve to murder the Golden Dream Pack, but they needed someone to distract her. Is it possible that they are afraid of Luna Divina and needed her out of the plan and maybe save her for later?" Sadness engulfed my body as I gripped onto Aiden's chair, due to losing my ability to stand. Aiden must have sensed my distress as his hands slipped themselves around my waist firmly before plopping me onto his laps gently. It could be possible. But why would they even need her? Aiden asked as I could feel Aiden's hot breath against my neck. He leaned forward and rested his chin on my shoulder. Not going to lie, but my inner wolf, and I love the feeling he gives us. "Alpha, we need to discuss this matter later. Julia needs to rest, and my wolf feels unwell," Ace stated as he rose from his seat with Julia in his arms in a bridal style. "The rogue we had captured today is being held in a cell with one of your pack guards torturing him. You and I will need information from him if we want to know who hired his group." And with that, he bowed in submission before leaving. I had been locked inside Aiden's room, now ours, for about an hour. In Aiden's large walk-in closet as I settled my new clothes on the right side of the closet. Knowing that I was done, I took 2 steps back and found myself staring at a very organized side of the closet, smiling proudly at myself. On the left were the shoes I had purchased earlier, and on the right were a lot of new bought clothes. Aiden had already installed a black vanity in the inside, which was positioned at the end as it was already filled with cosmetics from every brand. I walked out to a familiar scent to find Aiden dressed in only his black jeans, staring outside the large window. The black curtains were now drawn apart as the sun was shining through. My eyes found their way towards his naked back. Seeing his well-sculpted back made me drool. I took a step forward and Aiden must have realized I was there because he turned around, showing me his toned abs whilst making me drool even more as he gave me a sexy smirk. My eyes made their way down towards his hands where he was holding a small folded-in-half photograph. Upside down, but thanks to my very good wolf eyesight, I saw a young girl, smiling widely. I growled knowing that it was jealousy as my eyes shot back upwards to meet his hard gaze. "Who the fuck is that?" He growled in response and immediately sighed deeply as he made his way towards the edge of the bed. I didn't move, still pissed as he sighed again and patted the seat next to him. I suspiciously moved and sat beside him. Surprisingly, he handed me the picture.